All right, hello everyone. Welcome to an episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. I am joined by a very special guest today, none other than Jared Henderson. Hello, Jared. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, Philip. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well too. It's a pleasure to be here to sit down with you. I had the honor of being on your channel. I don't know how many months ago that was, but it was a while back.
It was
I
close to a year, probably maybe 9 months ago or
Was
so.
it
Yeah.
really? Wow, time
Yeah.
flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this is really an honor for me to have you here, and I'm looking forward to talking whatever comes up, books, philosophy, writing, lots of exciting things that you're doing right now over on your channel. Now that you are a full-time, what do you call yourself now? Full-time what?
I say writer and content creator, and I put the writer up front. So,
Okay, cool. I like it.
yeah.
The full-time writer, content creator. That's very exciting to me because I think a lot of us dream of being able to just make a go of it, right? That a lot of us who are here on this platform, I think a certain percentage of people who run booktube channels and that kind of thing are really thinking about writing as well. Many of us have taken the plunge, but very few people can actually make a go of writing and having a platform like this. And so it's really exciting to me to see someone actually going for it. And how has that experience been for you so far?
It's been really good. I think that there is something actually that just feels very good about going through what I'm calling this like my baby bird moment because like the mama bird has like pushed me out of the nest. I didn't quit my job. I got laid off. So
Yeah.
I have two options. I either start flapping those wings or like I die on the pavement. Like those are my options. And and yet I found it like I'm really happy. I'm writing just a ton. I'm working on more and more videos and thinking about how to make those better. And I don't know. It's what I've been wanting to do. And I mean, I think most of my life, if you'd ask me what I wanted to do, it's I wanted to be writing. It was one of the reasons I went to grad school because I knew it would be a chance to read a lot and write a lot. And then leaving academia, you sort of suddenly don't have nearly as much time to the idea of spending a day working on a paper is like no longer part of your job. So
Right.
I lost a lot of that. And now I feel like I'm like regaining all of the things I loved about being an academic,
Yeah.
or at least most of them, but writing for a broader audience, like more of a popular audience, we say. I once heard of someone in grad school refer to it as writing for civilians, which I made me want to throw up. But like
Okay. Yeah.
but
Right, writing for the laity.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's great. It's really really great. It comes with it all of these accompanying economic anxieties about looking at your revenue and like running
Yeah.
a small business basically and trying to build a life out of it.
Yep.
But I feel good. I do feel really good. If I'm looking at the trade-offs, overall it's been a net positive thing for me.
That's awesome. And for my viewers, I'm sure the vast majority of them know who you are and what you do, but could you please tell us about not only what your channel is and what you do there, but what kind of writing you're doing on your Substack? What's actually
Yeah,
available to the people who subscribe to that?
yeah. So I think if they know me and they know you, they know both of us, they're thinking they're probably like book people. They're like
Yeah.
booktubers or fans of booktube. And I'm kind of like I kind of describe myself as like booktube adjacent, right? Like I
Uh-huh.
like all of you guys, I like talk to you guys, but I don't do just book content in the same way. It's more of like a books and philosophy kind of content. And
Right.
I so over on my channel, which is just Jared Henderson, I try to bring some of the insights and some of like the sort of ways of looking at things that I picked up working on my PhD in philosophy and bring them as like sort of to a broader audience. Oftentimes though, that comes in the way of talking about books. I find it's just a really convenient way to frame things a lot of the time.
Sure.
Um, and over on Substack, I talk about books somewhat. Like I do like maybe once a month, I'll just like recommend a bunch of books that I've been like looking through or something.
Yeah.
But I write less about books there, and it's much more about philosophy. It's much more about like kind of whatever is on my mind at the time. And I'm publishing there 3 to 5 times a week. Three is kind of my minimum.
Wow.
I just had a small post do fairly well there, sort of gain traction outside of my general readership. And the
Wow.
title of that was just called Just Start Writing. And that was just me responding to some questions I had received from people about what they should do if they want to write, but they're afraid no one will read their writing.
Yeah.
And basically I wrote this 1,000 words just really quickly to say, before I was on YouTube, I did like podcasting and I wrote on a bunch of blogs and I did a bunch of stuff. I was probably working on this for like 7 years before I got traction. It's just that I kept starting new projects to see if that one would be the one, right?
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
just didn't slog away at one project. So what some people might think looks kind of like an overnight success or really quick success, because I did grow up really fast on YouTube. I feel like I was like laying the foundations of that for like a
Right.
couple of years. So anyway, like that was one of the posts. I'm working on one now on the topic generally is just about silence and about whether or not, like, what role we need silence for the sort of the creative or intellectual life or just for
Uh-huh.
being a human being. And there I'm talking like a little bit about like Martin Heidegger, but also about like more recent writers like Matthew Crawford, going back to the Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, to talk about like the inner citadel and trying to weave this through with a bunch of stuff. And so like that's the kind of stuff that
I
I'm
think
writing
maybe
more often and
the
posting on Substack.
transcendentalists might fit into that too, somewhat.
Yes, exactly. I think, in a longer version of this, I don't think it'll be in this version, but a longer version, like Thoreau should be,
Yeah.
it should be there, right? So that's the kind of stuff I'm often writing. Yeah,
So
it's sort of thinking. A reader and a friend of mine described it as like, you're the guy that I like to read because you'll think like a philosopher about the stuff we all go through, and that's what I've been like trying to do.
I love it. So for those who don't know, I think more people here are familiar with Patreon, but
Mhm.
Substack is a very similar kind of deal, and that's what you're offering from your channel, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So Patreon is really like a give me money and I'll give you perks attached to my channel, right? Like early access or bonus videos or something like this. The problem is I can't do early access because I'm usually editing like an hour before I post,
Uh-huh.
and I can't do bonus content because I'm never able to put out enough content. I think I always want to put out more videos on the channel. So like, where am I going to put a bonus video? I don't sell access to myself in a community because you could just join my Discord server and I would chat with you whenever I'm online. That's fine. That's fine
Right.
too. So
Right.
I was like, what can I give people? And it's like, well, I like to write and I should be writing more. So my Substack is basically like, it's $8 a month, which I know is a kind of hefty, initial price tag, but there's no higher one, right? There's no tiers. It's like you can give
Okay.
me more per month if you wanted. It's like optional, but it's just $8 a month. There are free posts too. So if you just signed up for the free stuff, you could get some free stuff, and then you
Oh,
could
cool.
then you could read previews of this. And if you ever decide, well, you know what, this stuff actually consistently looks interesting enough, I'll go ahead and pay.
That's great.
That's great. So I do these read along posts. It took me a year and a half to get through, partly because I was being super consistent at first, of reading through Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and that was always free. And then next month we're going to start Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and that's always free. Those read along posts are free. So that's for
Cool.
anybody who wants to read those and just want me to sort of like. So with Aristotle, I'll be more systematic. Like, here is 2,000 words trying to explain what's going on in this chapter,
Huh.
something like that.
Huh.
And so if you're like looking for that kind of introduction to philosophy and those other things, plus some other writing, I think it's a pretty good deal. But that what you mentioned is actually probably the biggest source of friction, is that everyone already has their credit card information stored with Patreon. and,
Oh,
and so and so you have to kind of convince them to take the leap with Substack at least once.
yeah.
I think it's worth it. I think it's going to work out better for me long term, too, because you just could think about building a viable practice for yourself.
Yeah.
But there is a little bit of friction there.
Yeah, but it seems to make sense to me, and I'm thinking as a person who writes as well. I write fiction, but as a person who writes, Substack almost makes more sense because that's kind of what I would offer too if I were going to do something like that. I even just said on a video that I released today, hey guys, I don't do Patreon, but if you want to buy my books, that here they are, they're
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
sale,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
a Substack would be a better fit, I think, for someone who loves to write. But you're also a reader, even though
Mhm.
you said you're booktube adjacent. You actually read a lot of the stuff that people love to talk about on booktube, like Wheel of Time is one of your favorite series, or
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
may be your favorite series of all time. Is
At
that right?
least for fantasy, it's like
For
my favorite
fantasy.
my favorite fantasy series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a One Piece reader too, I believe. Is
Mhm.
that
I am. Yeah.
correct? Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's plenty of booktube stuff that we can talk about as well
And
today.
and I just started reading Vagabond.
Oh, cool. I loved Vagabond.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my second manga that I read.
Yeah.
And I really loved it. It was my favorite up until I started One Piece. So yeah,
Okay, yeah,
really, really love that one. Even unfinished, I think I almost feel like it's sort of appropriate the way that
yeah, yeah.
he ended it with that exhibit. Or I guess maybe you haven't read that part yet.
I know about the exhibit, but I'm not super far into Vagabond. I started it like this week.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. Well, I would just say you have to see the exhibit after you've finished everything that's been published because it is, for me, it moved me to tears actually, that the exhibit part. And you can find it online. There are
Yeah.
websites that still have it posted and stuff. So, but that is so cool. So, all right, well, we have a lot to talk about here, but I do
Okay.
want to ask my standard question of you, Jared, which is going on the theory that you are what you read. What are some of the formative reads that you have had over the years, going back as far back as you like? You can go all the way back
Yeah.
to little Jared if you
hmm
want. But what have been some of the formative reads that would explain who you are to people?
Yeah. So I guess I was always set on being some kind of fantasy reader, at least a little bit, because a lot of kids' books that I read were fantasy. I remember reading the Chronicles of Narnia at a fairly young age. I
Hmm.
had the box set that I didn't realize was in the wrong order because it was The Magician's Nephew up front,
This box,
and it might
right?
be that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so with and does that one have The Magician's Nephew as the first book, or is it in publication order?
So I have labeled them in the chronological correct order
Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah,
here.
yeah.
But this one has The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as number one.
Okay, so I think I had a slightly later one, and it actually put The
Yeah.
Magician's Nephew first.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it
Okay.
was chronological, which apparently was Lewis's preferred order, which
Okay.
shows that authors don't understand their own works.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
but anyway, so that was a big one for me early on. Probably the first thing though that, and I was like reading a lot as a kid. I remember being in like third grade, and I read The Hobbit when I was in third grade. And it took me forever because The Hobbit's maybe a little bit tough for a third grader, but
Depends on the
um,
third grader, probably.
yeah. I looked it up recently for something I read on Substack. It's listed as like a sixth grade reading level, which I thought seemed high. But
Yeah.
um anyway, but I loved it. I loved it when I was that age. And then probably the first thing though that I got like excited about, really excited about, and this really speaks to my age, was Harry Potter.
Uh-huh.
Because
Yeah.
by the time like the third or fourth book was coming out, I could like really fall in love with it. And those were like, it's hard to explain to people the level of like frenzy that there were about like midnight releases
Yeah.
and things and text, by the time I was in high school and the last book was coming out, like texting with friends, like if you were done with it yet, this kind of thing.
Wow.
So
Wow.
as a kid, those were probably some of the big ones. Um, but I think if we're thinking about the books that I kind of would look at as like really formative for me, like who I am right now, ones
Uh-huh.
that I read like in earlier adulthood or in the last like 10 years or so. I think for me, a giant one is Ursula K. Le Guin's work
Yes.
in
Yeah.
general. The book, though, that I would pick out above all the rest is The Dispossessed.
Uh-huh.
Um, there is a really great book that's not a work of fiction that I love called The Intellectual Life by A.G. Sertionge. I talk about it on my channel fairly often.
Hmm.
And he was this um, Dominican brother um, in like the earlier 20th century who wrote this book that it's like a guide on doing like intellectual work, but it's like
Uh-huh.
very philosophical, but also sometimes really practical. And he'll say these funny lines about like it's actually like kind of perverse to take too many notes. Like you should only take as many as you actually think you need and things. Or
Yeah.
we'll talk about like what time of day you should write. And I really love that just because of the kind of the intentionality that was behind it, as we were talking about what are the books that sort of taught me to be to
I am
labor in the right kind of way. Yeah.
I am hoping that sounds so cool. I am hoping to read more Le Guin myself. I'm a huge fan, as you probably know,
Yeah.
of the Earthsea books, but I have not
Mhm.
read her science fiction,
Yeah.
which I know you've said in the past that you regard her science fiction as her best
I
stuff. Like,
do. Yeah. And you've
yeah,
got the right collection. The Library of America there is great for the
yeah,
Hainish cycle and everything.
yeah.
They've published
So,
so much of her. They've published like her poetry and like other novels and stuff. I mean, it's great. They're doing,
which,
but they're not doing Earthsea, or at least they haven't. And I think it's probably just a rights issue. But
oh, yeah, because I think Earthsea was this Saga Press edition here was
yeah,
all, I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it, but
yeah.
But which should I start with, the Left Hand of Darkness or the Dispossessed?
Well, the Left Hand of Darkness is the one that everyone says, and so there is there is
I'm gonna read both, but which should I
yeah.
read first?
I would read the Left Hand of Darkness first, then
Okay.
and then I would read the Dispossessed fairly quickly afterward. But
Okay.
I honestly think you couldn't go wrong with either. And my favorite thing about Le Guin, well, she asks questions that even today I think we still end up wrestling with, and it's very interesting. I often like point out to people that they like get interpretations of the work. They what happens is they want to fit Le Guin into like categories we've already like established, and
Right.
part of her work is like refusing to let you do that.
Yep.
And so I think Left Hand of Darkness is one of those. So you'd be able to see once you've read it. I think maybe we could say more about that. But
Let's do that if you don't mind. I'd love to chat
yeah,
with you when I've read
yeah,
these about both of them. Maybe I don't
yeah.
know. That'd be full.
And
Uh,
there's this essay. I have this I have this collection somewhere. It's probably somewhere safe. I'm still organizing my office after moving, so I don't know
okay.
exactly where this is. But there's this collection of Le Guin's essays. It's out of print, so I had to buy a used copy of it. But she wrote this when she published The Left Hand of Darkness. She was actually criticized by a lot of feminists for her work. It was seen
Yeah.
as and so she wrote this essay called "Is Gender Necessary?" But here's the
Uh-huh.
interesting thing: she later came to disagree with like her own assessment. She thought she was like too defensive. So what she did was she did not revise the essay, because she has this thing about how she hates when you like revise your, like, once your work is out there, she says like it's there. So she
Okay.
instead publishes this thing called "Is Gender Necessary?" Redux, which is her leaving editorial comments in the margins of the essay.
Huh. Huh.
Yeah. Which, by the way, makes me all the more angry that her son allowed one of her books to be revised after her death
Oh.
to remove like from some of her the Cat Wings books, because she has
Huh.
this children's series, and some they changed some words.
That was some of
Uh,
her very
uh,
earliest stuff, I
yeah,
think.
I think so,
Yeah.
and but they changed it a bit for modern readers, and it made me really annoyed because I was like, look, you know your mother better than I know her as like an author, but
Right.
man, like I hate this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm excited because I really have immense respect. She's one of my very favorite authors, and just on the basis of the Ursi books.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to, especially because of what you've said in the past about her articulating her life's philosophy. And I think my sense from what you said is that that's all the more clear in the is Hainish cycle. Is that what you would call all? Is that even a
Yeah,
thing, or what is
well,
Hainish cycle?
yeah, okay, yeah. So it's a thing, but it's also kind of fake. You have to be able to
Okay,
hold both of those thoughts in your head, I guess.
okay,
She's not super concerned with continuity, and she's not telling like an extended story. There's a background idea of these like the Hainish, who like are the reason that there are so many human-like species across the galaxy. That's
okay,
the that's the thing. That's the whole background. There's some shared technology that shows up in the stories, like the Ansible. She was the one responsible for this, and that's an instantaneous communication device,
okay,
you know. But there is very little. You don't need to read them in any order. You don't even need to conceive of them as a thing, other than like occasionally humans will be Earthlings will be mentioned as Terrans, and
okay.
that's it, right? Like
So not
it's
quite Le Guin's version of the Cosmere then.
no, far from it, far from it. And so
Okay.
and so it's a convenient, it's almost more of a marketing thing. And I
Uh-huh.
think like I got the sense that she was kind of ambivalent about it being like
Okay.
a cycle or a series. It's one reason to call it a cycle, I guess, is like it sounds a little bit less series like than series. But yeah, anyway, I would just say you don't need to worry about which one you read there. There's no prerequisites for reading any of the others, as far as I know. It's
Okay.
just a kind of shared imaginative universe that has many blurry boundaries.
All right, cool. Awesome. Well, I will definitely be I'm gonna I've reread the first four Earthsea books already, and I'm going
Okay.
to read the short stories and the final novel in the Earthsea, and then I'm going to read Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed. So
Okay. Very cool.
Very nice. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we were on your reading journey. I rudely interrupted you.
Oh yeah. So I mean, okay, so some Le Guin, the Sertionge book. Obviously, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is a really big deal for me. That
Yeah,
was like a really transformative read when I was in graduate school. It sort of taught me how to read old books in a way. I had
cool.
this professor who he kind of laid down the ground rules while you were reading. He's like, in this class for the rest of the semester, Aristotle is correct. The assumption is Aristotle is correct. Your job is to figure out how, in his own terms, he is correct.
Huh.
And he kind of described it as I think he had a religious education in the background where he was saying it's sort of a Talmudic reading here, right? So like
Uh,
Talmud scholars will like look at like one little line that appears in the Hebrew Bible and be like, that doesn't make any sense, and they'll just go to like these elaborate textual
yeah.
apparatus to make sense of it. And he's like, if that's what you have to do for Aristotle, it's what you have to do because your job here is to understand him. And I think that was really nice because the way we're taught to read is often very destructive. It's like critical in the sense of like spot a problem and make a big deal out of the problem, and then that's all you have to say about the work.
Right.
This happens in academic discussions. This happens in popular discussions, and people I think sometimes mistake that kind of criticism for genuine insight about a book too.
Right. Right.
And so having someone tell us that we couldn't do that for an entire semester was
Hmm.
actually a really great exercise in
Yeah.
reading this. And that's an approach I like to bring to basically any philosopher that I read, at least the first time, is like make sense of them in their own terms, like as much as you possibly can.
Right.
Then you're allowed to say that they're dead wrong about something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so
That's
that was that.
cool.
So that was a big one for me. I did a similar experience with Hume's Treatise of Human Nature,
Hmm. Hmm.
which was a really big sort of work there. And then maybe if I was just going to name like one or two more, the Confessions of St. Augustine. It's this beautiful
Okay.
mix of philosophy. There's a lot of heavy philosophy there, especially in the late chapters, but also a kind of like extended, like prayerful autobiography,
Yeah, I've read
which is
something. Yeah.
and it's often really gorgeous and super confessional, as the title would imply. But then
Yep.
also will meditate on Neoplatonic theories of like creation or something, and it ends up being seeing there. And then Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, which is another Neoplatonist text
Yeah.
about a man who's going to be put to death and is like visited by Lady Philosophy, like philosophy
Yeah.
incarnate, like visits him to like comfort him by reminding him of all the principles of true philosophy.
So I've
Um,
read Boethius, but I've read Boethius in Old English because it was translated by King Alfred.
oh,
And
interesting.
I've read it in Middle English because it was translated by Chaucer.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, I know that
I
it's
didn't.
an important text for you, and I
Yeah.
saw that you made a video recently on
Mhm.
how important Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy has been in your life, and it really is a great meditation on how to deal with all the crap that life throws at you, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's practical. It is a meditative experience, but it's also a practical experience, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and this fact that he was able to write this while he was in prison waiting to be executed and I imagine this is a man who kind of knows what's coming when they finally say it's time. He knows, and
Yeah,
yet can end the work by Lady Philosophy exhorting him to be good.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's it's just very, very powerful. And like when I'm struggling with much less intense worldly problems, to be able to fall back on that book and see someone sort of being the model for it is great. I had no idea that King Alfred
Yeah,
um
I can't remember.
was a
He did translate some things himself, but he
mhm.
also commissioned a lot of translations. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
actually cannot remember if I feel like he actually did the translation himself.
Okay.
If not, he commissioned someone to do it.
Okay. Okay. So he probably did it, but if not, it's more of a King James kind of Bible thing.
Kind of
It
situation.
wasn't like
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like James was there.
But you will find
Yeah.
that Chaucer translated it in Middle English,
Hmm.
and I think I have that in my. I don't know, did they put that in? I have my collected Chaucer here, the
Oh,
Riverside
nice,
Chaucer.
nice.
Did they put that in there? It's been so many years since I read that translation, but I'm just trying to remember. You wouldn't find it in too many other places if it's not in
Yeah.
here. Uh, So introduction, it might be just his own original stuff and not
Okay.
his translations. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's here. Yeah, it's in here. It's in
Awesome.
here.
That's great. Okay, I need to read this.
Yeah. Yeah, and Middle English, I mean, is you could learn to read Chaucer's Middle English in a couple
Mhm.
weeks if you were
Okay.
determined.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think you would have, there's all kinds of notes in here, but
That sounds like something I would really like to do, and
yeah.
something I know that I have absolutely no time to attempt right now.
Yeah, believe
Yeah.
me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find the opening here. Oh yeah, here I'll read the opening passage for you in Middle English
Okay.
in
Yeah, let's hear
Chaucer.
it.
This is Boethius. Alas, I weepinga, am constrained to beginnen verse of sorrowful matter, that whilom in a flourishing study, mad deletable details. So that's the beginning of
Nice.
Chaucer's translation. I can't see very well because these are not my reading glasses, but
Okay.
you could hear the Middle English there, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I could pick up a word or two. So, this is yeah.
So cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Any other important texts that spring to mind? When, like, so I know you're a fan of Wheel of Time. Where did that come? Where did that
Oh,
happen?
yeah, yeah. Wheel of Time was actually I only read that like in the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh, that's recent.
And
Okay.
yeah, that was recent. I was just like, but it kind of just has every so even though I really love it, I don't know if I consider it like a formative read in the sense that it didn't like change my taste at all. It just happened to like align with a lot of my taste. Like it
Yeah.
really like I'm a really big fan of retellings or adaptations of the Arthurian legend. And the Wheel
Uh-huh.
of Time just has like scratches that itch a lot, especially later on.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh
I know
um
which parts you're talking about. Yeah.
and so like that's yeah, I mean, even I'll be thinking about the Wheel of Time, and occasionally, like things will come to mind that I realize like are allusions to Arthuriana stuff, but
Yeah.
that I wouldn't have thought of before. Like just a time when Moraine is trapped in a tower, she's like suspended out of time, right? Like
Right.
Moraine is Merlin, right? And like this is
Yeah.
and it only just occurred to me that this was like one of those like those allusions, and it's not just Rand all the time, but so that was it's like important to me in the sense that I really love it. I would reread it at some point, and I don't reread a ton of series,
Yeah.
but I would
It's
reread
not a
this one.
short read either.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. It's another one of those like, who knows when I'll have time to ever touch it, um, but I wouldn't call it formative, yeah, because I just felt like my tastes were already fairly cemented,
Sure.
and I kind of saw this, and I really love the story. I love the world. I didn't see Jordan doing anything that like really blew me away in the sense of like how could a writer think of this stuff in the first
Uh-huh.
place. And I
Uh-huh.
say this with like a lot of love. It feels weird to say this critically about it, but like it's a very very well executed but kind of standard epic fantasy over a period of time that's sort of Tolkien but written 50 years later,
Yeah,
it's
I
and
don't think
it
it's revolutionary,
yeah.
but what it does is it takes a lot of things and brings them together in one place,
Yeah.
in a way that's pretty cool. I mean,
Where if I talk where if I think about like contemporary writers that I like a lot right now,
mm,
China Mieville, Neil Stevenson.
they're pushing the boundaries. Yeah.
Exactly. The fact Neil Stevenson, I honestly think is one of the most impressive living writers right now
Huh.
because every book could be like it could be a totally different genre, it could be a totally different style. He could be totally changing his prose stylings every time he writes. The fact that he could write a book like Anathem, which is this weird alternate universe, semi sci-fi kind of thing, but then could write um, the Baroque cycle, which is like this weird historical stuff, and then but also Snow Crash or 70. I mean, it's just there's so much like the variety that he's able to do. And of course, Mieville is like always experimenting and like always
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah.
Apparently, I heard a rumor through another booktube guy that Mieville just turned in like 1,000-page manuscript that he claims is like his magnum opus.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Oh,
I know
that's
Mieville
cool.
also has another book coming out really soon that's co-authored with Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves, I saw that. Yeah. So
I have no idea what it's going to be like. I think I'm getting a free copy. I think I got reached out to from the publisher, so I was like,
wow,
I'll read it, but
that's cool.
I
How'd you
was
get? You
I,
just
I occasionally you get solicited like email, and this is not the first time, but it's not super common for me. So I
uh-huh.
don't know why I made the list on this one, but
Huh.
someone from Penguin Random House saw me and sent me an email.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you get arcs and stuff,
I
right?
do. I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I'm a booktube channel, so I mean,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I don't standardly get arcs, of
Yeah.
stuff. I
Yeah.
didn't get a I didn't get a Sun Eater arc. So,
Aw,
I'm not bitter. I'm just
I haven't started it yet,
noting it.
but I'm
Yeah.
going to later this year.
No,
I have the first book on my shelf there.
I think you'll like it a lot. I think you'd like Sun Eater.
From what I hear, I expect to like it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It does sound like. Have you read R. Scott Baker yet?
I've not. No.
Okay. That's one that I predict you'll really get into. The Second Apocalypse
Is
series,
it
which begins.
is it kind of horror-ish? Is there like horror elements?
Okay, there are horror elements,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
I have to note that I'm a real wimp when it comes to
I am too. So
yeah.
if I can read it, you can read it. Trust me.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I would read a standard Stephen King horror. I've read The Dark Tower, but I don't know if I would read
Same. I've
a
read
horror
Dark
book.
Tower,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I would say that Baker's story is as disturbing, maybe slightly more than Dark Tower,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
in terms
I
of
liked Hyperion though, like Dan Simmons' Hyperion,
okay,
which has like
yeah,
horror elements to it. I mean, could be
yeah.
called a horror novel in some ways,
Yeah, I
especially
wouldn't
the
call
first one.
Baker's series at all like primarily horror, but there
Okay.
are horror elements in there for sure. And there's sexual assault and stuff like that as well. So there's some heavy
Okay.
stuff in there for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
see.
very bleak world. But Baker, like you, comes from a philosophy background,
Oh,
and
cool.
he is very carefully and deliberately exploring things in there that very few other authors do, or in a way that very few other authors do. He's
Yeah.
motivated by exploring these questions.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
like, do we have free will? And I think his
Hmm.
answer is not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Stuff like that. That's in there. That's why I say I think you would be a natural fit for the
Yeah.
Second Apocalypse series. I would love to see you read it. It's not my favorite series of all time, but the more I read, the more respect I have for Baker's
Yeah. I see.
writing. Yeah,
I see.
his prose is brilliant. He's just got a gift. So
And I do love like question driven fiction.
that's what this is. Yeah.
I know there will be people who in like booktube stuff will say like I'm a character guy. Like Mike is like I'm a character guy. I'm a
Yeah,
character
I
guy.
think most
Other
people. Yeah.
other people are like I'm a plot guy. Like as long as it's like an exciting plot, and
Yeah.
I am like a question. I can put up with subpar characterization sometimes if it means that the questions that are being asked and at least attempting to answer them,
Right.
is
Right.
coming out, and is worth it.
Yeah, no, you would. I think you would really get into
Yeah.
Baker.
Yeah.
Into Prince of Nothing trilogy is the first part, and then the second part is Aspect Emperor, which is 4 books.
Okay.
And of course, you've started Malazan. That's another series that I
Yeah.
feel is very question driven. But I don't know how far
Yeah.
you get up
I
with
read the
that.
first two,
Okay.
and I started the third, and then each time I started, I'm like, oh, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Even though I've heard Memories Device is very, very good. Like a lot of people talk.
Most people, that's usually a favorite in the
Okay.
series.
I
Yeah.
found Dead House Gates a little annoying to read at times
Uh-huh.
because uh there's like and I know what you're gonna say. So I'm gonna
Okay.
anticipate it when I say this. But there's like 17 plot lines, and then
Uh-huh.
they all just kind of show up at the same place one suddenly, and we're all just like, oh, of course, this is what it was all leading up to, even though you don't feel it, you don't sense it the whole time. And I know that this is because in Malazan convergence
Convergence. Yeah.
is one of the big deals. Um and so I'm willing to read more of it. There is just, man, I have found, um when I was working at it, when I had a job plus YouTube, I had so much more time actually, because my job
Yeah.
I could like I just got paid, and
Right.
I could take a book to work and take a long break sometimes and just read or something right now. Um, but I found that currently, because I'm just thinking about like how can I best use my time as I like figure out how to make this work, it
Yeah.
just means I have less pleasure reading, which
Yeah.
the good news, but I need to make, I already need to walk that back. I love reading philosophy stuff. I love
Uh-huh.
reading the stuff that I'm doing for my Substack and then I'm working for my book project. I love reading that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not work in like the traditional sense of like slogging through stuff that you hate.
Right.
But that means, when am I going to get a chance to just like read that really beefy fantasy series?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I've been planning a series, a longer video on the philosophy of Tolkien, which I think would do
Yeah.
very well and could be
Yeah.
very interesting. You and I have talked about it a little bit because
A little bit. Yeah.
I need people to look over the script at some point to make sure I'm not totally making a fool of myself. And you also get to see how insane my scripts look. They're like these
Yeah.
odd nested bullet points with like diagrams drawn on them. But
Cool. Cool. Yeah.
but you would uh but I have this rule that if I'm going to talk about something like that, I have to read at least the main series, The Hobbit and the Silmarillion, all over again. I
Oh, okay.
won't I won't I won't just do it from memory
Right.
or looking at secondary sources or something like this.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not going to read the entire Tolkien
Are
corpus.
you
All
reading
again,
his letters and everything as
I'm
well?
reading his letters. I'm
Okay.
not reading a lot of like the Lost Book of Lost Tales, the stuff that Christopher Tolkien kind of brings out. But I'm reading the letters because I find them really insightful. Um, but that just it's taking me forever to get through them because it's like, when do I have time to like just read 60 pages of The Return of the King or something?
And
um
are you, how much of the secondary stuff are you reading? Are you like, you're reading Tom Shippey's books on
Reading
Tolkien?
Tom Shippey, Peter Kreft, this like Catholic philosopher, wrote a book called The Philosophy of Tolkien. I read the whole the majority of that. I think that book sucks. So actually, I will not be using it as the basis of the video. Um, And what probably is going to happen is I'm going to narrow in on some themes for that video, because
Yeah,
I think doing a single video on the philosophy in Tolkien would have to be like 7 hours long.
easily.
It would be writing a full book. So I'll probably
Yeah.
narrow it down. I think like three themes have emerged and what I want to talk about. One of those is the relationship between like mythopoetics and truth, and how Tolkien occasionally in his stories like contradicts himself. And it's like,
Yeah.
but there's a nice way of looking at this, of like Tolkien is like filtering various truths through like various myths, and even as he writes them, even though they're all by his pen, they're not all from his pen, sort of in
Right.
universe. And
Right.
so the myth will present things in subtly different ways, in the same way that you could even look at like the Gospels or something that are going to present like the story of Jesus in subtly different ways,
Yeah.
each of those, or different creation narratives that like from the ancient Near East will present these things in subtly different ways, and maybe they're all just trying to illustrate. That's one of the themes. Another one is like I'm very interested in the ideas, like the philosophical idea of friendship, like what is like friendship. Like Aristotle writes a lot about this, and I think one of the best examples of friendship that we see in fiction actually is Samwise and Frodo. Like I think
Totally.
so that's a really interesting one to explore. And then the third theme that I want to explore with that is actually the Moorcock critique
Uh-huh.
of it. And every time I mention this to someone kind of in this vicinity, they're like, "Oh, that essay, epic poo," like, "Oh," but I think Moorcock writes like a jerk. Like the way he writes is he's a bomb thrower. You can totally get
Right.
what he's doing, right?
Right.
But there are interesting questions in the vicinity between
Sure.
the kind of nostalgia that Tolkien had, and then his own politics, and what Moorcock takes to be the sort of political message of the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
It's interesting because there are two different ways to answer that question. Like, what does the text actually say in it, like, and how it's received, but also what would Tolkien say what it says? Because
Right.
Tolkien has very explicit sort of political views, but they don't line up with what Moorcock says. But there's a question there, is like, are they the ones that are actually expressed in the text? Right? Because
Right.
I think we know that authors try their best to express their ideas through the text, but sometimes just because they say this is what it means doesn't actually mean that's the best reading of the text sometimes.
Yeah.
And so there are interesting questions in that vicinity too that I would like
I
to
think it's
address.
complicated too by the fact that Tolkien was the inheritor of a primarily 19th century, but also even as far back as the late 18th century, a tradition that was a rejection of capitalism
Yeah.
and industrialization. And at the time, capitalism was the new kid on the block. It was the
Yeah.
radical thing. It,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was the, as
It was the
opposed to,
disruptor that was going to yeah.
exactly. It was a
Yeah.
disruptor of an old feudal society, essentially. And so in a way, these people like Thomas Carlyle and John Ruskin and even William Morris, Tolkien was heavily influenced by William Morris, especially. Um, they were reacting in a kind of a reactionary way against capitalism, industrialization. But we see these critiques today as being very radical
Yeah.
because capitalism is now the norm in our
Yeah.
in Western society, and so these critiques feel like very radical. It's a very central part of my dissertation, actually. It was on
Oh,
the
okay. So this is
yeah
why you definitely should read the script when I'm working on a thing. This
yeah
is
yeah yeah
because, and also I think one of the problems that the mistake Moorcock makes is wanting to categorize Tolkien then into like a very post World War II kind of political framing. Oh,
right.
Tolkien's actually a fascist. It
No.
doesn't work. It doesn't
No,
work in part
no.
because of the fascism has this weird relationship to nostalgia, which is I think kind of where
Right.
Moorcock gets his hook in. But fascism also usually has a very strong industrialization motive, right?
Right.
Uh, uh,
Right.
um, um, Nature does not get conserved under fascist states super well.
Right.
So there are some really interesting things here. There's
Yeah.
one letter that Tolkien actually where Tolkien describes himself as an anarchist.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he means this in a weird way. He means it in a way that no anarchist has ever meant it, but because he's also saying he's a monarchist, like in the same letter.
So I
And
talk
what,
about these people as
oh,
one label that I think I called them conservative radicals.
yeah,
Was
yeah,
what
yeah,
I called them. Yeah.
yeah. So
Or
they,
you can
they
call
have
them
that kind of
radical conservatives.
they
Yeah.
kind of have that central thing of conservatism sort of neutrally described here, which is this like love of particularity,
Yeah.
like love of like exactly the place here. It's kind of a rejection of like the universal ideals you really see from like the 20th century left.
Yeah.
It's a love of this place for what it is and for what it's made here. A general disposition to think that things have worked out this way for a reason,
Yeah.
right? But that means that one has to often take some radical stands against things like new factories opening or
Yeah.
these. So anyway, it's a super interesting topic. Honestly, that itself could be the majority of an hour-long video,
Easily.
um
Easily.
easily. and,
Yeah.
and but so that's one of the things I want to address. But
Cool.
just to read that, I need to reread the Lord of the Rings again, just because
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's all kind of
I think
fresh.
you'll get some value from Shippy's books. I actually had the privilege to talk to him last year on my channel because he was doing his marketing his Beowulf
Oh yeah,
translation.
yeah,
Yeah, so that was really cool. Like I had seen him at conferences before, but I'd never had the chance just one-on-one talk with
yeah,
him. It was such a delight to
yeah,
talk with him and his insights. I mean, he comes at Tolkien from a kind of linguistic perspective, but I think he'll have some valuable insights for you there, for sure.
excellent.
Cool.
I will definitely be looking at that stuff too.
Well, I'm excited for this video
No,
that you're working on. Yeah.
yeah, who knows what'll come out, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's funny because you put a lot of work into. I mean, if people are hearing this, you should realize you're putting a ton of work into one video.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
And but the kind of I say it's annoying, but actually it's just more funny that some of my videos that do like the best
I know.
are literally just me turning the camera on and just talking.
I know. I know. And the ones that I feel like this is so this is brilliant, and I work so hard on it, and I get like
No.
maybe if I'm lucky if it cracks 1,000 views or
Yeah, yeah. So like that the video that you referenced about where I mentioned Boethius about just like books that kind of I fall back on during like when I'm like struggling. Like I said, books get me through hard times.
yeah.
This video. That was like the idea came with me. I looked at my bookshelf, grabbed the ones that I thought like were the most relevant, and just sat down and talked.
Yeah.
Right. And that video's like doing okay, but like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
worked super long on this stoicism explainer. And took me several weeks to write the script and to get it all, hammered out and stuff. And I
Yeah.
knew I was still, and that, it did fine, but it's not like didn't do as well. And I just think it's very funny. I think that actually might tell us though a little bit about what some people are looking for on YouTube, which is that sense of authenticity, right?
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
if you're approaching these big subjects, I mean, there are people who come to YouTube because they're just looking for entertainment and they like the really highly produced stuff. And it's like, there's an art to it there. There's like, and I respect it, but there are other people who just like they prefer the guy who just turns his camera on, holds the mic sometimes, and just like talks. And maybe it's less
Yeah.
polished, but it's more human. It's like a human connection through a
Authentic.
screen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I haven't figured all that out, and I just basically have accepted that I'm not going to be able to predict much of anything
Yeah,
these days. With the exception being, I started on this venture called One Piece,
yeah,
where
yeah, yeah,
that it's funny because I feel like this is an example of where the I've tapped into something that people wanted, that fans of this series are eager to hear someone give it the kind of analysis that they know it deserves. That, yeah, there's plenty of One Piece material out there, but and I haven't watched it really, to tell you the truth. I'm kind of isolated from all of it. Not because I don't want to watch it, but because partly because I just want to stay clear of spoilers and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. But I feel like there's a
yeah.
hunger out there for people to see people analyze the series in a way that's slightly more academic.
Mhm.
And I come along, I make a video, and initially I call it my thoughts on the East Blue Saga of One Piece. And one person early in the video, a viewer, leaves a comment saying, "Hey, you should change the title of your video to English Professor's Thoughts on One Piece." And I was like, okay, I didn't think it would make any difference. And the views didn't just, I mean, it was doing well before, but after that, the views went, and it seemed
Yeah,
like, yeah, that actually, okay, you're tapping into something there. And I feel like it's just, and all the time I've been doing this for like 4.5 years, there have been very few occasions when I've landed and really connected with something in a way that felt like, yeah, this was something that people really, really wanted. And this is the biggest time that's happened for me. Uh,
yeah. You
it's
know what?
funny. I could never have predicted this though.
You know, it tells me though that that you're just doing what you love though, is that
Yeah.
you didn't immediately pivot to only doing like manga analysis.
No,
Because
I
like
can't
because
do
the
that.
conventional wisdom that I get from people is like when you have a big hit video, make like 7 of them. Make like just go for it. And you've continued the One Piece thing because it makes sense because you're reading it, but you could
Yeah.
just do English professor reads manga, something like this, or go
Right.
back to those One Piece things, and who knows, you get getting a million views.
No,
But
I mean, look, I have to do what I love, and
yeah,
I'm loving One Piece, so
yeah,
it's great. But I'm also doing Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, and for whatever reason, I feel like those are brilliant discussions with AP and with Varsha that we're doing, and I get a few hundred views on that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that video, like right next to One Piece, where I'm getting, in a week, 50,000 or 60,000 views or something. So I just got to do what I love.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I think part of this, like One Piece fans are very sticky, but for One Piece stuff, like they're
Yeah,
here for One Piece stuff.
right.
I did one Piece video, but it
Yeah,
was mostly about the show. It did fairly well for me. Got like 80,000 views or something, and
that's good. Yeah,
and one I've never seen. It started off really, really low, 10 out of 10, did horribly. They found it a day later. I've never had such a big spike in one
yeah,
day. They
yeah, yeah.
found it, and suddenly my comment section is full of Zoomer slang that I that I don't understand. But
Think about
I
me, Jared.
yeah,
I'm like
yeah.
more than a decade older than you are. So yeah.
So I've been meaning to do a longer One Piece video because I know the One Piece fans would come back for that. But they like One Piece channels, I think. You know what I mean? Like they like
Uh-huh.
channels that do One Piece, which is fine, like because they're super into One Piece.
Right.
And my channel's just a little too all over the place for that. But I also want to do a longer video once I finish it. I think Vagabond has a lot of philosophy stuff
Oh my
there
goodness,
too.
it does. It really
Um,
does. Murphy and I did a whole series of discussions on it.
okay, yeah,
And that's why I fell in love with it, was the whole, it's a lot of Buddhist philosophy in there. It's really
yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah. And there's I think I also want to read Musashi, the novel by
Yes.
is it Eiji Yoshikawa? Yeah, 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 yeah. Eiji.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then the
Um,
what was it, Five Rings or something that Musashi himself wrote back in the day.
yes.
Right?
Yeah, so I've read Book of the Five Rings,
Okay.
which is like fine. If it's people will read these like classic works from like Sun Tzu or Musashi about like war and stuff, and they're like, it actually makes perfect sense of our lives. But you read it and like, Sun Tzu is like always attack your opponent with like the sun in their eyes, and you're like, well, that really kind of makes sense if I'm leading an army. That's or like be sure to raid their supply lines. Like, okay, you could stretch this out very metaphorically. Um, okay, yeah, it is. Eiji Yoshikawa wrote Musashi. I saw this
Okay.
described on the book as Japan's Gone with the Wind, which I have no idea why you would make this exact comparison, but it might
Yeah.
be that it's a very big historical novel or something.
Huh.
But Yoshikawa obviously is a big Japanese author, anyways. So I would read that to get some stuff, because actually Vagabond is based on that.
Correct.
It's
But
yeah,
I
so it's
think
based.
that the manga does depart from it in some
Yeah,
significant ways. Like
yeah,
there's a significant character that the mangaka decided to make deaf. That's not in the novel,
I
stuff like
see.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that. So I'd want to read that before I did the Vagabond thing.
Right.
Um, but it seems good, and I do want to make a bigger, longer One Piece video once I've caught up, or I'm reasonably close to catching up.
Where are you now in One Piece?
I haven't touched it in a couple of months, so I finished Arabasta, and
Okay.
I loved it, but there's still hundreds and hundreds of chapters to
Arabasta's
read.
cool. I love Skypiea, probably even
Okay,
more. And
okay,
now I'm on the Water 7 saga. I'm in the
okay,
middle of it, and it gets better with each saga somehow.
okay.
To me,
Interesting.
to
Yeah.
me. But Skypiea is highly, it's got a lot of illusions in it.
Mm,
It's really, I mean, I'm shocked actually at how well read Oda must be.
yeah.
Because it's packed with not only illusions, but some really great themes. And some
Yeah.
of them are very timely, by the way. There's environmental stuff in there, there's othering, there's colonization. There's
Mm.
some heavy stuff, which is really wonderfully balanced with the goofiness of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird because when you start One Piece, it does just kind of feel like a silly cartoon, pirate cartoon, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's what it is. And then it'll have these big emotional moments, and you're like, oh, okay, so it's like a silly cartoon that can be
yep,
emotional sometimes. And then you
yep,
keep reading, you're like, oh, it's a silly cartoon with emotional moments and super deep themes. And actually, the silliness is just like the hook or something.
yep,
It's a really interesting. I mean, I think we will look back on it, especially when it's complete, and talk about how kind of unique this work of art was.
it really is.
One, that it could have such international acclaim.
Yep,
One Piece has the One Piece phenomena is, we talk about we mentioned it here, but like the Harry Potter phenomena is like this big thing that we all kind of experienced when it was happening. We look back at it and say, can you believe it? Could that happen today? One Piece
this is it.
sells out movie theaters, and if
Yeah.
Oda ever decided to make a in-person appearance, it would be, there would be people buying tickets to Tokyo just to possibly see his face or something.
Yep. Yeah. If you've
Um,
been wondering when is the next Harry Potter coming, it has arrived, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
One Piece. Yeah.
And actually, someone left a comment on my channel, because people seem to be impressed, and I was happy about this. It means I'm picking up on things. They're like, oh, Jared's picking up on themes that only really come out way later. These
Yeah.
sort of
Yep.
this, because there's this kind of tension with the novel about these kind of anarchic themes, and yet he wants to be king of the pirates, and that's the thing that they were like, oh, you're gonna see, like, don't worry, you're gonna see, like, this is when Luffy like really reveals this stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
But then someone else left a comment that was just like, you have a chance to catch up, and for anyone who's thinking about reading it, you have a chance to still be part of this while it's like alive.
Right.
And reading it now is like actually really valuable in that sense, if you think that there's some value in being part of this cultural phenomenon. It's fun to be part of it, and
Yeah.
and there is some value in it. So yeah.
Yeah. I've really gotten so much from the engagement with the community, the One Piece community, the fans of the series who are caught up or are in the midst of it, and it's I had something similar with my Malazan reread and
Mm-hmm.
read, but nothing quite on this scale before, where it's just been,
Look, let's just like be totally frank here. If you were looking to make like tons of money talking about stuff online, you would
yeah,
not choose books, just because the number of people who read books
yeah,
is so low. So even if Malazan is like, I don't even think of Malazan as like a tier one super popular fantasy series. It's like
no,
popular, but there's like maybe like a sort of tier two. It's
it's
got
not
like diehard.
Sanderson level.
Yeah, it's nowhere
It's
close to the Cosmere or something like
right,
this.
right, right.
In
In terms
in
of
in many ways, that's
popularity,
very in many
yeah,
ways that's very positive. And it's
yeah,
also nowhere close to the Cosmere in terms of quality, but that's going in the other direction. I think Malazan is
Uh-huh.
much better in that regard. But the but the sheer scale of the One Piece fandom, both from the manga readers and then the anime fans, it's just astounding. So if you have a minor hit video about One Piece, or you capture a sliver of that audience on YouTube, you
Yeah.
can just get tons of views. I can see why. I don't say this cynically. Like, I can see why, for instance, Murphy figured out that it was better for her to split her channels into books and manga
Oh yeah.
and make the bigger one the manga channel. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Absolutely.
going to work out. I think that's working out really well for her, and it was smart to do. And
No,
it's not,
she knows what
it,
she's doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she's yeah,
Very
like she's
informed decision. Yeah.
yeah. So I think she just did. I think she did just totally the right thing there, and
Yep.
I think that and that's not, and I think some people might characterize it as like selling out, not her specifically, but in general. Why is it that when some people start talking about manga, that's all they start talking about, right? Well, it's like, actually, as someone who creates videos, there are two reasons that you might do it that aren't sort of about money. We can just bracket that one. We won't even talk about it there, but one of them is just you
Not that
love
you're
making
making a
that.
ton of money, by the way. People
Yeah,
think you're making a ton of money on the ads. No, you're not making much money on the
yeah.
ads.
Ad revenue is not huge. If people are
Yeah.
making it full time on YouTube, they're doing other things to help them make it full time.
Right.
I could not survive just on my AdSense. Let's put it that way. But
Yep.
the one of the reasons is you make the video just because you really love it, right? And that's a perfectly fine reason. But another one is it is actually very fun to make a video that a lot of people watch,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you get all of this engagement that are like these comments, and you see people like coming along for the ride with you, right? So it's not about chasing views so that you can have a bigger number. It's just fun to have 1,000 comments that are asking you questions or
Yeah.
engaging in a debate themselves,
So true.
in a way that if you make a video and it gets 100 views and you get 2 comments, and those 2 people might mean really well, and they're like, great video, and they like,
Right.
that's cool. But you get 1,000 people doing it, and you just, it's electrifying in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can see why people just want to keep doing it, because they're like, oh, this is a really great way to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, when I'm doing One Piece, I'm just doing the same thing that I've always done for the last 4.5 years. It's just that I'm connecting with a bigger audience, and I'm going
Yeah.
to keep doing that same thing because that's why I'm here. I love talking about stories. I love talking about fantasy and fantastic elements and storytelling. And that's what I'm all about, and
Yeah.
that's not changing because I'm doing One Piece. It's just
Yeah.
it's another story that this one happens to be connecting with a lot more people, and
Exactly.
it's because of the popularity of the story. But I also feel like it's right place, right time a little bit too, because I think, as I said before, I think that the One Piece fans are really, I think rightly, looking for more complex analysis of this
Yeah.
series. People are writing, I promise you, dissertations on One Piece right now, and there's plenty of material there. There's
Yeah.
plenty of material there. So
But
it's
but
cool.
I even worry that people who would write those dissertations, a lot of them are going to want to talk about the cultural phenomenon of One Piece,
Uh-huh.
placing it in the context of like cultural studies or something,
Right, right, right.
um, which is cool on its own, but it's a work of art that deserves to be kind of analyzed on
Totally
its own
agree.
term. Like, you
Totally
could
agree.
bring the sort of historical, critical, and formalistic tools to talk about the art itself. And I
Yep.
think you get this somewhat with the One Piece fans, who are like, everyone wants to talk about like us. They want to talk about like us fans as like
Yeah.
this force. Can you believe it? They're into it like this cartoon so much, basically is how they might see it, but they actually just want people to take the work seriously because they can see like actually that there's something great in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've known it for a while, and they're waiting for the eggheads to catch up.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, it's cool. I'm having a blast with it, and I'm by no means the first person at all. I mean, Murphy's done a lot of, I think, really good commentary. I mean, the way she approaches manga is similar to what I do, really. And other people I'm sure are out there. I keep hearing about this other channel. I still haven't watched it because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but there's a mother who's a teacher,
Okay.
Drawk Show, I think it's called,
Hmm.
Drawk. She's an English teacher, I think, and maybe a high school teacher. But anyway, she's been reading it with her son. I think the channel is the son's, but uh,
Okay.
it's like the mother is reading One Piece along with him, and I hear, I haven't watched the videos yet, but I hear there's some good commentary there as well. So yeah, it's out there, it's beginning, you know, we're seeing it. But
Cool. Yeah.
yeah. So awesome. Well, what else? So we mentioned Wheel of Time and One Piece. What are there other series that you would consider to be important to you? Not necessarily formative at this point, but that we mentioned Le Guin as well.
Yeah, yeah. I at least enjoyment wise, like I've been reading Sun Eater, and I think
Uh-huh.
that's really good and really enjoyable, and has potential to be
Book of the New Sun
like,
is one that we'll have to talk about too, because we
oh yeah, of course,
before. Yeah.
yeah.
You
Book of the New
mentioned
Sun
Sun Eater
is
because I
big.
feel like that's a big influence for Rockio, right? Is
Yeah. So it's nice to have a series though that's still going. You know, I
yeah.
typically only read stuff that's done or the authors are dead, or I don't read as much contemporary fiction and like or especially contemporary science fiction and fantasy. There aren't as many
Cool.
people I follow. And
How much Book of the New Sun and how much Dune should I expect to see in Sun Eater?
well, I think actually the Dune stuff goes down after the first book. It's like a little heavy in the first book, but there's like less of it. Um, I mean, the thing is, I think sometimes it's a little overplayed for Rockio in a way that's a little unfair,
Uh-huh.
because there are some things that he's making very clear, like allusions to them, or like very clearly borrowing certain things, like a kind
Yeah.
of force field that looks very Dune-ish or something like this.
Uh-huh.
But like honestly, with Book of the New Sun, I think a lot of it is more in tone. It's similar to Book of the New Sun.
Okay.
And rather than
First person narrator.
first person narrator
Okay.
reflecting back, it's actually kind of structured as if Hadrian, the main character, is writing memoirs basically, and you get to like read these. But I think with that,
Is he at least more likable than Severian?
it's somewhat, yeah. I don't actually like Hadrian all that much. I think,
Okay.
I think he's not super likable, but he's more likable than Severian.
Okay.
Because Severian is like deeply unlikable.
I mean, that's a
But
pretty low bar there.
yeah. Uh, so I like so you see it, but and there are some sort of deep theme things that kind of are in Book of the New Sun. The worry I have about the discussion, the way it goes, is people like to point out those influences really early on, and then
Yeah.
it kind of colors the perception of the series, as if um as if Book of the New Sun, as if Wolf was writing a book that was free of influences. We
Right.
sort of take
Right.
those as if they're the thing, right? And someone
Yeah.
says, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is all very derivative." Like imagine like this is all very derivative of Tolkien. Tolkien is very, very good. In many ways, you could make an argument that Tolkien is very, very derivative. If
Oh,
you mean this in a
believe me,
because
I've read the stuff that he read, and it is, if you want to use the word derivative,
yeah, I don't like the word actually.
right.
Like because if the art's good and it wears its influence on its sleeve, I don't really mind those two things, right? It's
Everything
just
is
that,
derivative.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this, you could make the same critiques of Tolkien. So why are we making those critiques of Tolkien and of and of these newer authors or something?
Right.
We have this tendency to view classic works in our genres, like whatever they are, as like these perfectly hermetically sealed things that just emerged,
Yeah.
and then later on we talk about people who are influenced by them, but we as if those things themselves were never influenced. Yeah.
That's a really excellent point. Yeah, and I have to agree. Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun after
Yeah.
all.
Did you just come up with that, or is that
I feel like I might
yeah.
have made that up.
Yeah.
Sort of a meta commentary there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to read Sun Eater. It's a series I've been hearing about.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mike has been championing it for quite some time, and he's succeeded in getting some other big booktubers on board. I think Daniel Green recently started to read
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and started to praise it. So that's all
Now
good.
one series I have not read at all yet, and I need to, is Janny Wurts' stuff,
Oh yes, Wars of Light and Shadow. Yeah.
because she has sent me two different boxes of books at this point,
Oh wow.
and not the whole series, but like a lot of them.
Yeah.
And in like gratitude for that, I ended up buying the whole series on Kindle just as well, just so I could like
Cool.
have. Um,
Yeah.
the thing is, I will often read that kind of stuff like before I go to bed. And I'm like working so much right now that when I go to bed, I'm really tired. And I'll read like a page of her work and be like, this deserves more focus than what
You
I'm about
can't
to get.
read
Yeah.
words when you're stupid. You cannot.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's got to be morning reading, and
Yeah.
morning reading is a very precious time for me. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's
But I know
brilliant.
this.
I mean, it is brilliant. I can't say enough about Janny Wurts's prose, her ideas, the layers she has put into this world. She's just brilliant. She should be talked about right up there with Erickson and Robin Hobb, and just the most brilliant writers in the
And she
genre.
really slogged to just like get the series through. It took a
Oh my
long
God.
time,
She
and like,
started writing this series the year I was born, 1972.
yeah, yeah. So the dedication is really impressive.
Yeah, yeah. And just the last book came out in May,
Yeah,
this year, just this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
It's 11 book series, and these are rich. I'm 6 books in right now.
Hmm.
And it gets richer and deeper and vaster with every book. It's incredible, actually, to see this unfold. Yeah,
That's great. At least she's getting. It seems like she's getting more traction, like online. People are talking about her
I
and
think
stuff.
so.
So
I think
yeah,
so. I hope so.
yeah,
There's a couple of read-alongs. I'm doing the one with AP and with Joanna,
yeah.
but there are some other ones out there, and more people are picking it up, and it is well deserved.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
It's not though for it's not a popcorn read at all. So
yeah,
if that's what you're looking for, this is not it. This is one that is gonna require some thought as you're reading and some focus, and it's gonna keep you thinking for a very long time, even after you put the book down.
yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. I predict it. You'll get a lot from that as well. She's just so much fun to talk to because she's so deep as well. There's just all kinds of stuff going on there, and she's
Yeah, yeah.
so accomplished in so many realms.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's also an artist, right?
she
She's
does
a
her own
painter.
cover art.
Yeah,
She does
yeah,
her own cover art.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I
incredible.
think I saw her just mentioning on Twitter that she like does mosaics sometimes and
Yeah,
stuff. Like,
I mean, January, she says stuff like, "Oh yeah, I play the bagpipes. Oh yeah, I've done rock climbing. Oh
yeah,
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 I
yeah,
know first aid. She's a okay. So she knows everything about horses, but she also rides out on a horse and rescues people and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like,
yeah,
what have you
yeah,
not done? Oh yeah, I've done sailing.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Incredible, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my research into sailing for my trilogy was I had a friend who had a sailboat. I had him taking me on a lake and show me how to do it. But I could kind of sort of fake a little bit from that, but she actually knows how to sail. So,
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's like deep knowledge.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, big
yeah,
difference. Big
yeah.
difference. And she weaves it into the books really nicely. Like sometimes you'll read an author who's obviously done a lot of research online into a certain realm, like sailing or something, and they just want to drop all these terms in the
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah,
Now I
yeah.
know this, and now you have to know it too, reader.
Yeah,
It's not like that at all. It's just a deep. It's in the bones of the story.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
This is
so
the entire Encyclopedia Britannica article on blacksmithing in
yeah,
like the Viking era or
I mean, I
something,
I had a
but
friend who was
doesn't get the feel of being with the hammer. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I actually have a friend who's a blacksmith, and I asked him about it in order to make my little chapter authentic, where there's a blacksmith, a smithy. So yeah,
Yeah. Nice.
but I don't know that much about. I mean, I got to hit the hot metal a few times, and that sort of thing. But yeah,
It would take a lot longer, right? Because for you, it's still like you're feeling the hammer like as a hammer, and
right.
you're like very aware of its weight, and it's uncomfortable in some ways. And probably
Yeah.
when you first hit it, it like reverberated down your arm in weird
Oh
ways, and you
yeah,
thought about that. But for like like a blacksmith who like knows what he's doing,
yeah. An
it's an extension of
extension.
himself.
Yeah.
He's not even conceiving of it in its like material terms, and it's just like, what can I do with it, right? And I kind of just know what I need to do in order to
Yeah.
do it.
See, I got to figure out how to get tennis into a fantasy novel.
Good point. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Although tennis is a medieval sport, it was invented in the Middle Ages. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Okay, this is going in my back pocket then. This is going along with the name Tiffany for things that feel very modern but are actually medieval.
yeah,
So that if you put them in a medieval era novel, like if you
yeah,
met a character named Tiffany, you would
yeah.
be like, that's wild. Why would you name her Tiffany? Give her a more medieval sounding name. But Tiffany
Tiffany's an
was
old one. Yeah.
was like an anglicized theophany, right? Early
Yeah.
on, like very, very early on, or like epiphany, right? So,
Yep.
so tennis is like this too. Wow. Yeah.
Just Google, or if you're on YouTube, type in the search bar real tennis, and you will see there are some people today who are still playing it the way it was played in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
It's an indoor thing,
Yeah.
but it was
Don't type
played.
that in the YouTube search bar until you're done watching this video, though.
Yeah, watch this video first. Yeah, finish this video first.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. It's medieval. There are even some, I think, if memory serves, no pun intended there, with the tennis, having somebody, there literally, it was nobility, of course, that would be able to
Mhm.
play this sport. And it was considered lowly to begin the point. So they had a servant begin the point, or serve, in the beginning to
Oh,
start the point.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. Somebody can fact check me on that, but I think there's something about that out there. But so yeah, I guess I could work that into a fantasy novel
Yeah.
then. So
Because do they
you're
ever? I feel like if they want sporting in fantasy novels, they're always just going to choose like archery or horseback
archery or
riding, or
hunting or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hunt down some poor critter or other. Yeah.
yeah,
Like in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, where they
yeah.
have the hunting episodes there.
Mhm.
So you're writing mostly nonfiction. Are you thinking about some fiction as well, or
You
is
know,
that
I had fiction projects that I'd worked on. I'd even talked to you about some in the past, right? But I have basically decided that for now, everything I do is in service of this one project right now. So it's all nonfiction. So I'm not even conceiving of fiction. And that's why I'm reading way less fiction. I'm just like, I'm
yeah?
just thinking about this project.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I don't think anyone, if things work out and they can see an announcement about a book coming out at some point, I don't think that they would look at my writing and have been able to predict like the exact topic of the book. But I
Uh-huh.
think if they have known what I was reading or writing, they would sort of be like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. It's like, so this is my hope there. It's like, because you don't want to give people just the thing you've already been doing, like online. You want it to
Right.
be a bit of a spin, but I want it to make sense for me too, for people who like this stuff.
Cool.
So
Well, wow.
so
Well, I will certainly
it's all
be.
nonfiction.
I'll be picking up a copy, whatever it is,
Good, good.
when that happens, and that is going to be a win. I feel like you're in a very productive stage right now, and this is all leading somewhere very
Yeah.
cool, I think. So
I have this feeling, and man, this will really come back to bite me if it ends up not being true in 6 months, that I will look back at this and be like, oh yeah, this was a great, like, getting laid off and stuff, which is what inspired me to go full time, was
yeah,
like the best thing that ever happened. Like I
yeah,
feel like it's gonna be like that. I feel confident. It's just
good.
that the trick is to just make that actually happen.
And I was just going to say, the only way that you can guarantee that that's even a possibility is to go for it, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Which is what you're doing. And my hat's off to you. I really love that. I admire it. I'm rooting for you,
Thank
as
you very much, Philip. I
many of us
appreciate
are
that.
in this community. Really, it's tremendous. I would like to think that people can make a go of it, even in our society today,
Yeah,
doing something that is fulfilling and creative and contributing to the greater community that way. I would like to think that that is still a possibility.
yeah,
It
yeah.
can seem like it's very easy, but I feel like it should be a possible thing in a healthy society, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we're just figuring out how to make it work because we're in this kind of gig economy here
Hmm.
where people are having to just go out and hustle for themselves using things like YouTube and all these different social media platforms. And I feel like we're in an era of a lot of change in that respect. Like
Yeah,
traditional publishing is not it's not going away. There are still great people working in traditional publishing, trying to put out great books. So I'm never out here to just crap all over them because they're basically like you and me. They want to see great stories out there,
yeah, yeah.
and they're under all kinds of different pressures. But we're in this chaotic situation right now, and I don't know. It just feels like a
What
lot of different things are being tried.
what I think we're undergoing in publishing, in work in general, in the ways that we think about our lives because of online and stuff, is just that a lot of the cultural defaults, which really only became defaults in like the mid 20th century,
Right.
are no longer defaults.
Right.
They can no longer be taken for granted. That's what I think. That's the big difference right now. I think
Right.
that these are defaults that, in fact, need to kind of earn the right to stick around.
Yeah.
And things like, why would, not that traditional publishing is going to go away. In many ways, for some authors, I think for me, for instance, it would be better, right, for like the kind of project I'm doing. But
Yeah.
why is it the default, right? No,
Right.
there should be an earnest question about, is it best for your project?
Right.
Um, you know, uh, and what I would hesitate to do though is to start thinking that the things that are disrupting the defaults are themselves the new default. Who knows? That's
Right.
the thing that we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Um, Many things that we take for granted as just the way of the world are not, fully determined, throughout history. They are often heavily influenced by the current cultural or economic conditions, or just weird randomness and contingency. And we should be open to that. And I think be willing to explore those and ideally view them as opportunities and not just doom and gloom.
For sure. Yeah. For, a realm that I'm somewhat familiar with at this point is self-publishing, and it's in some ways it's the wild, wild west. But it's also the place where I feel like the most creativity is possible in terms of
Yeah.
fiction right now. It's just, it's, if you want to write a certain kind of book that's never been done before, and you want to be really experimental, you're self-publishing. It's totally on
Yeah.
you, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas,
And also I think in it's not only you can be experimental, also there are certain classic ways of looking at classic epic fantasy or something like this,
yeah,
which is just gonna do better in self-publishing
yep.
than it's gonna
Oh,
do.
don't I know it?
Yeah, right. Like you wrote a very kind of classic epic fantasy story.
Yeah,
I think you did better in self-publishing than you would have publishing with Orbit or Tor or
probably.
whatever.
None of them would be interested in me, honestly.
Yeah.
So, and that's cool. I'm fine with that. I actually like where fantasy is going as a whole.
Hmm.
I think it's a promising time. We could look back on it as a golden age of a sort. But yeah, I mean, on first look, what I'm doing is very much classic. Although I think if you were to read the third book, you would see that it actually is very different. But it definitely feels very classic in the
Yeah.
first book, particularly. But yeah, it's not something I can't say to the publisher, hey, look, if you get to book 3, it's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
feel really novel. They're going to be like, yeah, bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but as a self-published author, I can do that. I can engage. I can make the story that the vision that I have. I can put it forward, and I have the tools to make it a good story if I want to work hard enough on it. That's the key
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
There are editors out there, freelance editors who are very, very good, who are excellent. I worked with
Hmm.
one editor, AP Canavan, who's outstanding, extremely insightful. He's worked with Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont and many other authors. My books benefited tremendously from that process. I worked with an artist that I loved. I worked with a cover designer who does great work, a map maker. You have all these things out there now. These weren't available, 30 years ago like they are
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And you have these platforms, Ingram Spark and Amazon KDP and so many others where you can make this happen. And yeah, so it's much more viable. But what I always want to emphasize to people, if you are thinking of self-publishing, is it's a ton of work, and you need to be willing to not only put forward that work, but also invest in. I mean, I would not recommend using, for example, AI cover art or something like that. It's a nice shortcut. It's cheap, but I don't think it's going to do you any favors in the long run. So
Yeah. Yeah.
hard work. Nothing that is worth achieving happens without hard work, I think.
No, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like I'm very fortunate right now that like a platform like Substack exists where I can sort of work my thoughts out in public.
Yep.
And for a certain kind of writer, and I would call myself this kind, who can write a lot quickly and
Yep.
maybe is okay putting out less refined work as long as you kind of understand that it's all coming out, as I'm thinking through it.
Right.
Um, it's a great platform. It doesn't mean that it's easy though, because you still have to build your audience. You still have to write a lot. You still have to do a lot
Right.
of, the new platform just gives you a way to do the work, right? But it doesn't mean that you can get away with not doing the work. Yeah.
Right. Whereas I think when you do publish that book, that's going to be something that you're going to edit again and again and again. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
that's a different edit.
this is one of the reasons I'd want to go trad, actually, is to like work with an editor there that I can just like can really work this out. Yeah, yeah. Where with Substack, if I'm writing this often and publishing this often, I can write it and then I can maybe rewrite it once, or I
Yeah.
can do a thorough once over. Even then, I'm not going to catch all my typos. With the book, it'll be the agent goes through it for the outline and the proposal and make sure everything looks really great. The editor goes through it to really see how how it all coheres, and then walks through chapter by those sorts of things. And
Cool.
I think that's fine. I want that for the book, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so you're creating a community, aren't you? With between your Substack and your Discord, you
Mhm.
have a community of folks who are in a constant dialogue about stuff that you like to think about, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I have this. In fact, it's up on my other monitor. So I'll just look at this. I'm looking at. I had a bunch of people join my Discord yesterday, actually, because I mentioned it in a video, and so a bunch of people came. And I'm just looking through,
Cool.
and we have a channel where we just call, "What are you reading?" And I'm just gonna like some random books that I can just see here. Someone just read "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" by Friedrich Nietzsche. Someone read "Letters from a Stoic" by Seneca. Someone read "Stoner" by John
Oh
Williams.
yeah, yeah.
Someone was reading "The Last Light of the Sun" by GGK. Someone else was
Cool.
reading "An Illustrated Brief History of Western Philosophy." Uh, and that's just me just grabbing at random without scrolling, right?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
like that's so I have this whole community there that just reads these sorts of things, that talk about them, that post about what they're reading and stuff. Yeah. So
Wow. And that is what
yeah,
we're all about here on
yeah.
YouTube is the community. And I'm really happy that you're part of it, Jared.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I'm glad you're around, and I'm really happy that you're making this work, and I'm rooting for you, and I think we're going to see some cool stuff coming from your channel and your Substack and this book that's now I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. I wish you the very best with all of it. And if you're one of my subscribers and you haven't yet checked out Jared's channel, there will, of course, be a link in the description. So go and check that out if you're interested in philosophy at all, but a philosopher who's also read some cool books. And sounds like a really great community you've got going there. So it's really cool to hear about.
I would love to have more people join. So that sounds great.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for watching this, and until next time.